everyone, it's Raghu Markus, and this is Mindrolling, and this is a very special episode that we put together, and it's in honor of Robert Thurman, Bob Thurman, who was very close to us. He passed about a week ago, and this is mid-June 2026, and he had done many episodes with me on Mindrolling over the years, and he joined us in retreats in both Maui and Boone that we have been doing for forever. I mean, since Ram Dass really went to Maui and started living there in, 2005. Bob was the most generous, loving, joyful human being, period, with such tremendous, tremendous wisdom. And the way in which he imparted it, it was just, it was fun. It was entertaining. You were riveted by him when he, actually, I remember I'm going to say whenever he taught, whenever he gave a talk, we were in Washington once. I'm just remembering this in this moment with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who Bob was very close to, learned Tibetan in like a month and a half or something crazy. And we were there with His Holiness, who was doing teachings for a week, as I said, in Washington, Kala Chakra teachings. And I just happened to, fortunately, meet with a few of us, Sharon Salzberg and Krishna Das, meet the 17th Karmapa. And it was a fairly extraordinary meeting. Nothing spiritual happened, except something did happen, and I did go into an interesting deep space. Next thing I know, I just jumped in a car with some people and ended up at a Bob Thurman lecture that was happening outside of the main event, so to speak. And it was riveting. His combination of wisdom and humor and joy was extraordinary. So we put together this, a bit of an anthology of some of the different excerpts from the different Mindrolling episodes that he did. And just personally a way to pay tribute to Bob. I mean, he discussed so many different topics. Obviously from a Buddhist perspective, but in reality, he was able to bring it all together where there's that interconnection of everything. And here's what he said about being realistic, which was a major topic that we would gather with him about. Being realistic, he said, is the best approach, because the better you understand reality, the happier you'll be. The less you understand it, the more unnecessary trouble you'll put yourself through. That's why when people ask what Buddhism is, I tell them Buddhism is realism, but a lot of talk around really the way that we are so solidly attached to ourselves and our self-importance, our self-interest. And he would talk about replacing the natural tendency towards self-cherishing with a deep, radical altruism, where you regard others' happiness and well-being as your primary focus, which in the end, it's, as it says here, you get so much when you leave aside this self-cherishing, self-interest, and start thinking about other people. I mean, that becomes a motivating factor in one's life. It's not the act of doing good in order to have a result that'll enhance our ego and ourselves. It's the opening of a space within which we see the reality of our interconnection. And within that altruistic motivation, we reach out to be of service. These are the kinds of things that Bob talked about and shared with us over many, many years. In fact, when we were in Kenchi with Maharaji back in the day, us Westerners, Bob was living with Nena, his wife, and he had just had his child. I think Uma is the oldest of their combined children. And he talked about, I go back and forth. He said, I used to have to go back and forth to go from Almora to Nainital if somebody needed medical help or whatever. And he said, I always looked down and I knew about Neem Karoli Baba. And I don't know why in the world I didn't get down and have that darshan, It's interesting. And another thing he talked about, which is so cool, we talked about what Maharaji meant to him. And so you can listen to that. That's very much part of who he is. There was Bob had nothing but a reference to these kind of beings, these siddhas, of honor. I mean, there was no way that he separated out, even with Ramdas. Ramdas talks about soul all the time, and he'd look at Bob and the other Buddhist teachers, shyly. Well, we're talking about soul. I know Buddhists don't have a connection to quote unquote soul. And he would go on talking about it from the point of view of where that is not separate. There's different ways to get to the mountaintop, and we can't separate one path over another. He's just tremendous, tremendous being, Bob. And I'm so happy to be able to just present this little anthology of my wonderful hangouts with Bob on Mindrolling. So here we are. This is Bob Thurman on Mindrolling, and we'll see you again next week. You know Roshi Joan Halifax, I'm sure.
I do.
And I was.
I love her.
Yes, I love her too. And we were
Roshi
doing
Joan of Arc, I call her.
Yeah.
Saint Joan.
Yeah, we were doing a little thing together, and I just said to her at one point, "Look, you've been friends with Ramdas forever. You're a Zen Buddhist. Tell me," and you've seen Neem Karoli Baba, you've seen pictures with Ramdas all the time, of course, everywhere, and you hang out with us all, at all these retreats that we do and so on. What in the world do you think about this being when you look at that picture? And she turned to me and
Ramdas?
Maharaji. When you look at the
Maharaji,
picture
yeah.
of Neem Karoli Baba, which you've seen so much because of your relationship with Ramdas and others of us, and she said to me, when I look at his picture, what I get back is through his eyes is empty. He's empty.
Empathy.
Emptiness.
Oh, empty.
Empty, yeah. And then that made me recall what Ramdas once said when he was talking about a moment of being with Maharaji. He is talking about the love without a cause, basically, that we all felt, or there was no reason, unconditional, completely.
Yeah,
And he
absolutely.
said, he just kept repeating in one moment, he was so empty. He was so empty. And I understand that, of course, by having that experience, but I sure would like you to talk about emptiness in a way that it really does affect. It's not a lofty thing to realize. I think there's something to it for us on a day-to-day basis of working with it.
Of course, my favorite phrase, I think, is Holiness's favorite phrase, a favorite phrase of everybody since Nagarjuna's time, which would be from around 100 before the Common Era to around 500-600 of the Common Era. He had a very long life, like Methuselah, according to us, not according to modern whatever. And anyway, he wrote in one of his works, the deepest teaching is emptiness, the womb of compassion. Or you could translate the word for womb as essence, but emptiness, the womb of compassion, and that's shunyata karuna garbham in Sanskrit. And it's very interesting that you say that. Ramdas, I love Ramdas. I've known him since Ramdas himself since 1959, 1960, really longer than I've known Dalai Lama. Back, I was undergraduate at Harvard in the days when he was there as Dr. Richard, and I love that guy. And when I first met my first teacher, my root teacher, what they call in Buddhism, although now Dalai Lama is my certain absolute guru, but my root teacher was Geshe Wangyal. And when someone asked me, after I met him, who had driven me to see him in his funny little monastery in New Jersey, and I said, "That's my teacher. I'm coming back. I'm staying here forever." I was all going crazy like that as we were leaving our first visit. And he said, "Well, what's with him? He's just this humble little guy there, like in New Jersey, this Chart House, a little temple in there. Like, what is this?" And I said, "Why, you've been seeing gurus all over the place. You're on your way back to India. Why him?" I said, "Well, because," I said, "all the gurus I've seen were so full of their own holiness, although in a good way, that I always felt there's no room for me. Whereas this guy is not even there. He's so empty. And therefore I know that he will only focus on me in the sense of he'll know what I need and want, so I can trust him, that's what I said. And at the time, I didn't even know what I was saying. I can tell you now. It just automatically came up. Because these great beings, the point is, and Dalai Lama is same now, when I first met him, maybe not so much because he was so stressed and worried, had such heavy responsibilities. He was young, but now definitely he is empty in the sense that, in the same way, in that he is not full of himself. He's not thinking. That we have this thing. Shantideva teaches, it's the teaching, but Buddha taught it, but he articulates it, where you don't think about what am I getting out of this situation. You forget about that, and you only think about what is somebody else getting out of whatever it is all the time. So you're switching. They call it the exchange of self and other, but what it means is you're exchanging self-preoccupation, being caught in your cycle of thoughts about me. What am I getting? What do I want? Where am I? What about me? And you're thinking about, well, what about whoever it is, and them, or when you're meditating and no one's there, it's all of them. And when a few of them are there, it's this or that one, or all of them that are there. And so that's the emptiness is that in their orientation is to feel what the others are feeling. And I sort of, when I see pictures of Maharaji, I feel the sweetness in him so much when I see it. And I kick myself every time I think about it or I meet anybody, that I kept driving back and forth. Sometimes I was one of the few people who had a car on that Almora mountain in those days. So I was like an ambulance to Nainital. I would be taking people, often people who had broken things and, sick in various ways, and or shopping back and forth, or having to go see the Dalai Lama driving off to Dharamsala from Almora. And so I never stopped to see that great person, And when I, and the sweetness to me transmits most strongly. In a way, it's interesting. Since I knew Richard or Ramdas so long, he is I see him as like an amazing holy figure. And his whole thing, since his stroke and everything, is out there, more so even. Although his articulate, he was, of course, so articulate a person. And so what an amazing lesson for him to be a little constrained in that respect. And deepening, I think, it really at a wonderful sannyasin sort of level time. And but I think it was KD who transmitted to me somehow the sweetness of Maharaji. And then when I saw Maharaji in films or in pictures, from sort of under the KD bhakti, I could feel this tremendous sweetness, and then I don't regret much because I feel he's around, he's a manifestation, he's same being as Geshe Wangyal, as Dalai Lama, Avalokiteshvara, Avalokit, the Buddhist notion, it was the original bhakti thing in ancient India, whether people know it or not. And Ishvara means God, Ishvara part. But the Avalokita is a kind of little bit of a subtle tweak against the idea of the big, powerful God you're scared of. Because Avalokita means who looks at you with loving care. So it's the God who looks lovingly toward you, Avalokita, Ishvara. So it is, and it's considered the incarnation of the compassion of all Buddhas, not just this Buddha or that Buddha, the Avalokiteshvara. And the sixth Karmapa is an emanation of that, the Dalai Lama. There are many other Tibetan ones, many women who would associate it with Tara, are incarnations of that. And this is something Westerners get puzzled about, but that kind of being is not limited, that they have to only emanate as one at a time, because of the Jesus thing, people get all hung up, okay, there's like one emanation, who's the big one, this sort of thing, but in the Indian thing, the generosity of love and compassion, cosmic, almost theistic, you have to say, love and compassion is so powerful that even though the creators were relativized by the Buddhist science insight, not to anthropomorphize the absolute, but so the gods are all there, cute Shiva's over here, Vishnu's over there, then which one is bigger? They do that. By the way, they admit all of them. They don't mind it. So similarly, the idea of the emanation, the nirmana, the magical emanation of enlightened beings, is unlimited. It's just unlimited. And so they're all around us. And, I might be looking at one right now for all I know. And I know I'm not quite there yet, but that Maharaji would be exactly the same like Dalai Lama or 16th Karmapa, or I get from Larry Brilliant. He has this whole thing in his mind. He's merged together the 16th Karmapa and Maharaji. I can feel it.
Yeah.
He talks about
it. We've talked about it. We've had the same experience. Yeah.
That's absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
And they're just the same people. Doesn't matter, Hindu, Buddhist,
Right.
Jubu, Buju, whatever. Doesn't matter. Actually, Dalai Lama likes Jubu and Chris Boo and other Boos because he doesn't want people to become boo-boos. He wants them to stay with their grandparents' religion, not to upset their grandparents.
Yeah, right.
And some few weirdos like me, he says, well, some people can't help themselves. and I'm not a very good Buddhist anyway, but it's because it's knowledge that, I'm a knowledge freak. That intuitive, experiential knowledge. I am that kind of a freak.
Beautiful.
I love Ramdas. Please give him my love.
I will do that. And what a beautiful definition of the reality of emptiness, and exactly what
coming back to that, let me just a little more. Coming back to that, see, the empty thing is suddenly it can't happen by thinking, oh, I'm going to be empty now. It only happens by having to look inside yourself, and eventually at some point you will see through yourself because you won't find any self. And then, okay, you can go ahead and call that thing that you didn't find the Paramatma, that it was you and it couldn't find itself. Why would, I guess a knife can't cut itself. You can do that sort of thing. Or what you can also do, if you have a little more technical, analytical mind, is you realize that once you're looking through yourself, you see everybody else. You have become, and then everybody else is there. And then once you see that you're not a rigid, stuck thing in there, you feel so much better inside. It's like you melt this little, I also used to joke, it's like your birth doctor, your gynecologist left a clamp inside you, in the baby. You had it clamping your heart all this time. And suddenly that is released. It's not clamped anymore, and you feel so much better. And then you perceive the clamps in others' hearts. And then you want them to figure out, you can't go in and rip it out. You're not a Filipino surgeon, but you know that how by understanding themselves, they will do it. So in other words, when you realize your own emptiness, you immediately realize your interconnection with all of other people. The real meaning of emptiness is not space. That's just an analogy. Like, some people wrongly teach it that, oh yeah, in your space out and everything's cool. No, that's wrong. Space itself is empty. And what happens is, emptiness means relativity. So therefore, when you realize your total relativity, then you realize your connection with every being. And they're all your mothers, and you've been their mothers. And, you have to love them because you're stuck with them. Yeah. So you better have to optimize your relationship with them.
let's get down to somebody sitting down and getting real. And
Yes. Right.
as they sit, they can be doing mindfulness exercises. They can be doing vipassana, following the breath, whatever
Yes.
anybody's predilection is that gets them into a place where they've calmed down the monkey mind to a certain extent. And
Yes.
then suddenly things come up.
Yes.
And these are the most obvious in terms of the people that I get mail from and that we talk to at the retreats or wherever we
Yes.
are. Fear and judgment.
Yes.
Those are two very, very difficult emotions that really catch people, even in their getting real practice. So,
Yes.
what of the talk about that and
Well, there's
antidotes?
this thing in the popular mindfulness movement about non-judgmental observing the way your mind is working, counting the breath being a device to try to focus on something, and then notice your mind wandering off it. And this is then giving you a deeper insight into all the distractions that ordinarily go on in the mind, and then learning to to be more discerning actually in what trains of thought you allow yourself to have. It's by learning to dismount from trains of thought, to jump off the trains of thought and come back to your counting. So that's a very basic original thing. And the non-judgmental part, I think, is in order to cope with the fear issue. Because when you become more aware of your workings of your mind, everyone has a self-image of themselves, who is exploring the meaning of life, who would be therefore such a person as would want to do mindfulness practice, that they have a self-image that they are good persons. I'm a good guy. I'm a good woman. I'm a good person. And when they are things and they start looking deeper and watching the different processes that are in this immensely complicated thing we have as a mind, they will find some little bit salty thoughts, or or especially to use down and dirty thoughts. They will notice in themselves, and that will make them afraid because they will feel that, gee whiz, maybe I'm not so good, maybe this and that. And also, of course, they will also have thoughts about things that they are afraid of in the world, which maybe one should be, like being run over by a bus or something. And, anticipating maybe falling down the street and being run over by a bus. That's good to be afraid of that, so we don't do it. But so that's very good, the non-judgmental initially. However, vipassana does mean discerning seeing. The V part has a sense of penetrating or critical, a V like a bicycle, like a bi, dividing something is what the V relates to. And pasana is just means to see. So seeing by dividing means kind of critical and analytic meditating. So you're observing your mind, and then you do actually begin to kind of edit your thinking after a while when you're open to all the different dimensions of your mind through the non-judgmental initial viewing. Then the practice is to anticipate negative emotions, negative motivations, negative self perceptions, negative perceptions of others, and also observe the mechanisms whereby we become angry, we become jealous, we become lustful, we become overly arrogant or something, and learn to kind of enter into the gaps of the mental reactivity that produces these distressing emotions that cause harm to us and to others in the world. So, and that's distinguished from shamatha. I think, unfortunately, some people, when they initially get to the mindfulness, because they are so anxious and distraught mentally and stressed out, we all are in our modern society, that they think that vipassana means shamatha, which is the other kind of meditation where you're trying not to think anything and you're trying to develop a one pointedness, just concentrate on one thing without any extra thought. And that's important to be able to do to intensify the critical vipassana part. So shamatha and vipassana, or samatha, I guess in Pali, and vipassana, Sanskrit has a little different. Vipassana and shamatha, they have the shas out, but otherwise the same word. And so So that's the practice that Russell, what was it, Drussel or Russell was asking about. And what
Duncan.
Yeah, Duncan. And what I think Sharon does is she's a very advanced, of course, mindfulness meditator, although she's very kind in her teaching, how she presents her thought patterns sort of in tune with how other people think, so they'll feel encouraged to try it, she's very advanced, so I think she probably zooms down in to some deeper space than just counting and just watching some distracting thoughts, because of her immense expertise and many and long experience of practice, meditative practice. And so she goes down to where she kind of sees through into a quiet space. She sees through into a deeper space. And of course, she's a very sensitive and emotional person also. So she may, try to see different things she got into and tangled up in and try to correct them or to improve her reactions to them and so on. The slogan that comes out of Barry is such a good one about it's not necessarily what emotions or thoughts you have, it's how you react to them, how you relate to them. That's the famous Joseph Goldstein saying that they repeat to great effect and to great benefit, I think. And so she does a little of that probably, but I think she goes to a very deep place most likely. But how do I know? I'm not an expert.
Yeah, well, one would say that just being with her, and you and I have both been with her a lot.
This is called waking Bardo, meaning Bardo just means between, so it's between birth and death. And so our human embodiment is this precious gem, actually, that I think actually I personally believe is shaped. We're aided, we have come from all kinds of other life forms. We've all been every other kind of life form in an infinite past. And we're encouraged to come toward this very strange shape, which is the human shape, because this is the sort of close to the divine and close to between the animal and the divine, and very, very intelligent and very interlockable and interentangleable, and very vulnerable also. So at a place of very, where we can really develop compassion and empathy with others, It's a sort of high mammalian form, and we're not that aggressive, actually, really. We can, unfortunately, with our intelligence, we can cook up nuclear weapons and horrible things, and guns and things, but we don't have really claws, we don't have fangs, we can't spit poison, etc., particularly, So we're very kind of wimpy compared to a rhinoceros or crocodile or something. And that's nice. That makes us able to approach each other and be interconnected with each other. But the thing is that we are not, therefore the goal is to be lucid waking. There's lucid dreaming. There is no death Bardo. It's called the death point Bardo. Then it's the reality Bardo. There are 6 Bardos, but there's no death Bardo. There's the death point. And the death point Bardo is when we first touch the clear light and that Satchit Ananda. And because we're afraid of Ananda, because we have been not lucidly waking, so therefore we can't, and because we've been used to investing ourselves only in our environment. So we shrink from Satchit Ananda, being awareness bliss. We shrink from it. We're scared of that bliss. We're scared of too much awareness, and we're scared of even being, So we really have a strong wish for non-being, actually, because we're so sensitive, So, but the death point one is where that happens, and you sort of skid into all forms. And then if you haven't been generous in life, if you haven't practiced letting go through bhakti, or through wisdom, or through meditation, or through a high dosage, if you haven't, or near-death experience, if you haven't experienced letting go completely, then when you do have to let go, you immediately crawling to reestablish a boundary and have some mechanism that I'm not all of this, I'm this, you see. And that's out there outside of me, and I have to control my relationship to it. And then that's when you go into the reality Bardo. So the death point Bardo is just very like the first second of enlightenment, actually, high enlightenment, where you let go of everything, But when you're not generous enough, when you're not open-hearted enough, when you haven't cultivated exploring, opening, yourself, then you shoot right past it. You don't notice it. Just like we shoot through our life. People, when at the moment of death, right, people report, my life flashed before my eyes in a split second. Well, what that means is they didn't live lucidly. They ran around making money, getting pleasure, doing things, and they have only one split second of quality time when they were there now somewhere, when they were, in the middle of like Black Panther or something, and they were all excited, or Avatar, and some drama where they were blown away temporarily. So that's why it's so short. Otherwise, boy, if you had a great life and you had lucid waking at the moment of death, it'd take your whole lifetime again, because it was all quality time all the time. So that's our job, is to waken lucidly more and more, become more and more self-aware, more and more, and then the more we do, then the more bored we become with ourselves, the more alert we become of others, and then we wake up that way. So it's just when you see that, it's sort of based on the wisdom of impermanence and knowing that you're a constant change, and therefore being able to surf reality, instead of the constant effort of trying to control it all, be a control freak. You start surfing it, and then you find so many more things in the reality, and then you find the death point right here in life, and then you don't fear death, because you realize every cell in your body is constantly vibrating, and it's changing, and you're dying every second.
Can you just give me Right Livelihood 101?
Sure.
Real quick.
Right, actually, I don't like right and wrong. I like realistic and unrealistic for the Eightfold Path, because the point is, it's whatever connects to reality. Right and wrong are sort of like following a rule, and the Western ethics coming from Christianity on the one side, and then the other side, sort of whatever. It's like you're following rules, laws, But realistic means you have a livelihood that is the best way of fitting in with reality and living relativity, And the best thing for human life is not to be harmful. So that's basically all it is. You don't be a butcher, if possible. You definitely don't own chicken farms and slaughterhouses. You don't trade in weapons, poisons, drugs, human trafficking, anything that's harmful to beings, animals or people, is basically realistic livelihood. But the Buddha was more practical than the Mahavira, who he was a colleague with, in a way, who was so freaked out about it that, you couldn't breathe in the air because there might be a bug in it, and and then you couldn't. And the Buddha allowed his monks, for example, if they went to a household that ate meat, and they gave them some chicken soup, they could have it. But if they said, oh, well, we're going to make some chicken soup, we have to go kill a couple of chickens, then we'll make some chicken soup. Then they said, no, thanks, and leave.
Right.
But if they're already eating that, and that's what they eat, you can't refuse, actually, unless you're allergic to it or something. And so then the Jains were all wound up about that, about the Buddhists. But the point is, in those days, that was realistic. And you didn't blame those people. And, they had an argument against a certain guy who was not a Jain and not a Buddhist, but another one of those early teachers, who had a thing where you just starve yourself to death. And when your body dies, then you attain moksha, they thought. But then Buddhists were against that, because if you starve yourself to death, you kill your microbiome. And the Buddhists knew about the microbiome, ancient medicine. Really? And, yeah, sure. They knew you were made up of a community of beings. Your own body was. Yeah. And so if you kill yourself, you're killing a lot of other beings who are a colony inside yourself. So he was there is a certain amount of harmfulness you can't avoid as a human being. But the idea is you use this platform of the human life with its intelligence and its vulnerability and sensitivity, and therefore kind of urgency about becoming something higher. And then you try to become a being of light. You try to become like Obi-Wan, Jedi, and a Buddha. And then you can really be helpful to others. And then you really are not harmful, because you don't need ordinary food, and you don't need, you just live, you're just being of energy. That's the Buddhahood. It's like that.
Okay. So
And you could manifest this coarse body where you'd go and have to hang out with people and be like them a little bit to get close to them. But you actually don't need a thing, you know. But technically, it's such a preposterous definition for materialists. We don't agree with it. We can't really believe in it if we're brought up materialists. But a Buddha is a being who is consciously aware of themselves, the body and mind, from the micro energy, pure energy level. You know, if you think of your hand as made of quantum energy, right? There's atoms in there, but that's just a level of magnification. And inside of that, there's quantum energy. And then there's light inside of that. And of course, light is everywhere simultaneously. That's why light can't go faster. And so if you're conscious of your hand from the light, that's the most deepest level of the presence of the relative level of the presence of the hand, then you can you could add 50 fingers if you needed them. Do you know what I mean? You can just make anything out of anything, supposedly. And I grant you, and I realize that is very unrealistic sounding to materialists, but that's how Buddhism is, Buddhahood is defined. And in other words, that's the human opportunity of evolving into all these things that I think are coming into the American unconscious by means of the Matrix, the Jedi, sci-fi. Sci-fi really is beginning to make sort of subconsciously seem possible, even that you could be a being like the one who is the one,
that we can bend the spoon.
Yeah, that's what I want to make a fourth Matrix. I'm desperate to make a fourth Matrix. I talked to Joel Silver, and he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to have to work with those actors, the same actors, But the only one I still like is Keanu, especially, and I want to resurrect Trinity.
Yeah,
I don't know how we'll do it, but somehow. And because you realize that in the Matrix, toward the end, and even already in the second one, he started operating with his mind on material objects outside of the Matrix.
yes,
Remember, he knocked out all those octopuses when he was flying.
yes.
And one time when he first did it was in the tunnel. He was walking around and some octopuses came after him, and he went like, and then knocked it down and then passed out.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yes.
So that's beginning to hint that this is a Matrix. And there is a being who can be the one in this, that is, know the structure of it, the inner design of it, as well as participate in it as an individual.
Yes.
That's kind of cool. But they never unpacked that.
No.
Yeah, the third movie was just not that great. I don't know.
Well,
they dropped the ball.
I love
there.
all of it, except I'm pissed off they killed off Trinity. That pissed me off. Some octopus put a spike in her heart.
Honestly, I don't even remember the third movie. Is that
what?
I don't even remember the third movie. Is that
Really?
bad? Yeah.
But it was so cool. The battle.
Disappointing.
The bad guy even got the ability to multiply his body. And how did Neo defeat him? It's totally Buddhist. They don't even know it themselves. The Wachowski sisters are my heroines. The way that he was defeated, the bad guy he just became just as powerful in the Matrix as Neo, and he defeated him, right? And then he was going to turn Neo into himself, right? So he plunged his fist into the Matrix Neo. Remember that? And then Neo came and he started going, oh no. And actually he became a good guy like Neo.
Oh, yeah.
That's how. So Neo defeated him by becoming him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was going to make Neo himself. But once Neo was totally open and willing to embrace even the evil guy, then the evil guy turned good.
Yeah.
So he couldn't be the evil guy.
That's cool.
Wasn't that cool?
Yeah.
I forgot
Then, of
about
course,
that.
they dragged the body over back to the computer, and it was all completely confused after that.
Have you seen any?
What?
Have you ever seen a monk do any of these things? I hear these stories.
What thing?
Well, I mean, the stories I've heard is they can walk through walls, they can walk on water, they can fly, they can transform
They can.
into rainbow
By
body.
definition, they're not just Tibetans, but Theravada. This is all common Indian knowledge. This kind of thing, by definition.
Have you
Have I
observed
ever
it?
seen them? No, I've heard of it. Yes, but I have not seen it.
All right, let me interject.
Yes.
Today, at breakfast, a friend of mine who was with Maharaj
Aha.
with us back in the day,
Yes.
he has had one experience where he saw Maharaj in a taxi in Chicago, where he lives. He said, something else happened to me. I said, what? He said, I went to the Schwitz.
You speak louder.
I went to the Schwitz,
Oh,
to the steam bath.
with
And,
Maharaji?
No, he went alone. No, Maharaj wasn't there. And then he was there. He said there was another man there
Yeah.
and steam coming. And then there was one other man came in the room, and this other large gentlemen left, he said. The one who came in the room looked like, one of these really tall, cut cheek, handsome dames, right?
Yes.
Something. He said, I swear to God.
What?
He walked over to the wall, all right, opposite the door, and went into the wall and disappeared.
I believe it, because by definition I have to. But if I saw it, I'd flip. But I have seen some extraordinary things, but you're not supposed to talk about.
Right, that's what I thought.
Yeah, but a little bit. But I didn't see that going through walls and things like that in a way, except at certain moments. Actually, I did a little bit. Like my Mongolian guru arrived when, like from New Jersey to New York in a moment, etc. So I have a little bit seen that.
Yeah.
But you're not supposed to. But I was in altered state also. So then people could say it was just a hallucination. So, and then I have seen some other thing. But then my wife had a killer on this one. My wife once, there was an Indian guy who was asking me at a lunch, a wealthy Indian guy in the Trump Tower, actually. They had an apartment there. And I was about to tell us, and he said, well, you know the Dalai Lama. Have you seen him do any miracles? He's going like that. So I have seen a few things, but I didn't. So I was sort of thinking in my mind, what did I say, And I didn't want to completely disappoint him, but you're not supposed to talk about it. So my wife, Nina, immediately says, oh, yes, many times. What did you say? And then the guy's leaning on the edge of his chair. And I'm going, oh, what did she say? So then she says, well, we've hosted him a lot of times in different events. And, we've sort of monitored him like Raghu does with other people coming and going and all that sort of thing. And she said, and in all of those events, with everybody wants a piece of the Dalai Lama, she said, in all of those events, I have never seen him not give his 100% attention to whoever was in front of him seeking his companionship. And the guy goes, oh, and then she says, that's a miracle. She says, and he goes,
Nobody wants that.
Yeah, I mean, let's not leave that point. That is the biggest miracle, as far as I'm
exactly.
concerned.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Actually, in the Buddhist literature, they say the biggest miracle about a Buddha is his speech. Because it's through a Buddha's speech of teaching Dharma that other beings can open to their own potential. Rather than showing a miracles. Although Buddha, in many of the sutras, Buddha definitely performs miracles. In the Vimalakirti Sutra, he performs awesome miracles that are really cool. But then, when I translate it, I write an introduction. You guys can see this as an allegory, or you can think maybe these kind of extraordinary things are possible if you are open, if you can open your mind like that. But you can do it whatever way you want. It doesn't matter. When I was undergrad at Harvard, I read Aldous Huxley. Actually, Aldous Huxley came to a theater performance I did where I played Troilus in Troilus and Cressida.
I didn't know you were an actor.
I was then. I had aspiration to do that and intention, and actually more to be a playwright than actor. But I did act in that one performance. And at the inauguration of the Loeb Theater on Brattle Street in Cambridge, a Harvard thing, and Aldous Huxley was there at the opening of Old Troilus and Cressida, and there's a terrible speech at the end of that where Troilus laments the fall of Troy and his loss of Cressida, and Huxley wept apparently in my delivery.
Oh, really?
And he came backstage to tell me that, and he was really nice. It was my one meeting with him. And then I was reading Henri Michaud in French about mescaline. So I discovered the psychedelic world. I discovered the non-conceptual understandings that you're thrown into having to kind of deal with experiences with psychedelics. And naturally then was interested in Richard and Tim and Ralph, the triumvirate that was working at Harvard at that time. Although I didn't get any stuff from him. They were blamed as if they had turned on some undergraduates, but it was circulating already in the undergraduate body, and it wasn't really there. They didn't really. They had some experiments with some people, I think, very small doses. Actually, we considered them somewhat square. Actually,
Really?
yes, because they were into set and setting and moderate and
Yeah.
observation and small doses. They were being very responsible, psychologists doing their research, and we were taking big doses of different things and riding motorcycles and listening to Joan Baez singing at the Cafe Mount Auburn on Ann Auburn Street behind the sort of off a block away from Mass Ave. We had a whole scene. There was a whole scene. And I was already married to my first wife at that time, and I was a young madman. And then in the middle of that, I lost an eye, which was really lucky because I could have lost my life. I was a bit wild driving and motorcycling and so on. And so a garage accident, lost the eye clumsily doing something in the garage, and then that made me want to drop out of Columbia. That was a big impermanence visionary experience in itself. And when I came out of that, I wanted to leave Harvard, and I didn't actually necessarily want to leave that marriage, but my ex didn't want to go with me to India. I was going to Hermann Hesse in hand, Gurdjieff in hand, Edward Conzo's Project Paramita in hand, etc. I was off for India gradually. It took a while. That was 61, fall of 61. And then the process of doing that, I stopped by the Tim and their building. They were living in North Cambridge, I think, at that point. They hadn't gone to Newton yet. So I kind of got to know them, introduced myself to them. And there I was like one of their sort of people on the fringes of their thing. And they were kind of surprised that we were riding motorcycles while stoned. But we've had a great time. There's a few other people I know. And
what was Ram Dass like then?
Well, he was wonderful. He was, he was a snappy Harvard professor. I believe he had a green Mercedes convertible that was, it wasn't souped up, but it was a nice green for me. He used to ride around that, and he was very trim, and cheerful, and very, of course, brilliant. And I think he had tenure or something. I believe he did at Harvard. And Tim did not. Tim was like a visiting prof, and Metzner was maybe a fellow. He wasn't really on the faculty there, I think, at that time. And they were doing, they hadn't yet gotten more far out. So anyway, then I went off to India. So then I didn't see him for over a year. And when I came back at the end of 62, I then stopped by their Newton thing, their thing in Newton. And I may have had a trip or two. I tripped a little bit on that pilgrimage to India. But then fairly soon after that, I met Geshe Wangyal instead of going back to India. And then I started studying in New Jersey.
Right, your teacher.
And Richard, as you remember, he wrote about Geshe Wangyal. He was almost the first big Eastern person that he met. And he came down to see me there, and he brought another fellow student of mine from Harvard who had been more involved with them while I was away, and who had his issues. He had issues before he was involved with them and after. And then he thought maybe the Mongolian Lama could help him, and he did somewhat help him. A man named Foster Dunlap, who was a marvelously brilliant person and so on. And that's another whole story. But anyway, that brought Richard down to the monastery, and he met the Geshe, and he drove him around a little bit. And I believe he was driving him in his green Mercedes when they ran out of gas in the East Side Drive. He was taking him somewhere, which is an incident he repeats in the Be Here Now, as I recall. But somehow he didn't really study that much with Geshe-la, but he realized there was something special there, from the East. He didn't know what at that point, right?
So this is before Richard went to India first.
Yeah, before he went, right?
Yeah.
But he was still in Millbrook at that time, And then, various all kinds of things happened. And then Tim came back with my future bride, who was his ex-bride at that point, or about to be his ex-bride, Nina. And then and they had some things happened in Millbrook, and then eventually Richard decided to leave Millbrook, and then Richard went to India. And then he became no longer Richard, where eventually he became Ramdas, right? Which was really great. And I met him once then when I was a graduate student in India. I didn't see him during my whole graduate time. When I came back from, and I didn't take any acid at all during the whole time I was a monk and with the Dalai Lama and with Geshe Varga, because I was learning to a little bit do that with meditation, like Richard did later. And in fact, I was so into that at a certain point, long after Ramdas was, I think while he was in India, at one point when I decided to leave the monastery, because I realized that, I don't want to talk too much about me, but I decided to leave the monastery. And then I thought, well, I'm going to go, first of all, see my old friends at Millbrook, because they're in trouble now with, Tim having been busted in Texas and all this kind of taking on the government, and with a trial hanging over him for pot, and so on. And I said, I'm going to go get them to cool down, learn to meditate, stop taking so much illegal, and try to get them to see there's a safer and more legal way at the moment. And so I went up there, and then Tim was happy to invite me there, but then things escalated. And at a certain point, I realized they wouldn't really listen to me, because they basically figured the reason I was a monk even, or had been a monk, was that I'd had a bad trip or something. And, because they were so convinced that being stoned was the doorway to enlightenment. So then, just to show them, I said, well, okay, turn me on and see what happens. And they did, and it was pretty far out, actually.
Oh,
The kind of high dose Millbrook dose that they used in those days.
yeah.
And with what I had studied for 3 or 4 years as a Tibetan monk, it was much more far out than earlier trips that I had.
I bet.
And then they still, of course, wouldn't listen to me, and I stopped worrying about it that much. And I didn't quite know then what to do, but luckily, somewhere around that time, I met Nena, and then I decided I would, then a whole thing later happened with me, where I went back to school and everything. And then I didn't see again Ramdas for some time, but he stopped by when he was beginning his sort of mission around the States to see me once, when he was actually fairly fresh back from Maharaji, and long hair, and still wearing white dhotis and white long Indian things, big beard, and very eyes,
the eyes
shining. And he came to visit us, and my kids were kind of worried. They didn't know what he was, They were like, oh, and because he was kind of flipped out, so he rushed over to hug them. If he hadn't approached them, it would have been okay, because they'd been in India. They were only 3 or 4 years old, but especially the older one, the boy got it, and he was like, oh. But when he went over to give him a big hug, so then Ramdas was kind of a little freaked by that. Oh no, he didn't react to my total love. He hadn't yet, I think, had enough experience being a guru a little bit to realize that you have to kind of approach people a little more carefully. Because he himself was so flipped out with the joy of having discovered Maharaji and beginning to dig deeper than he had. And of course, people mustn't forget, of course, about Saint Ramdas, that before that, he was a psychonaut, Stan Groff and my term, a voyager in the mind through serious psychedelics. And he'd really been heaven and hell, which I think opened him, as it did for so many, to then receiving the darshan and the blessings of Neem Karoli Baba. If he had been a straight, square psychologist when he met Neem Karoli, just a regular psychologist, I don't think it would have been the same outcome, actually.
And he says the same thing. He says the same thing. How about we need to talk a little about, you mentioned it briefly, but motivation is a big thing. And the motivation to stop being so is yourself as the center of the universe, and when that gets attacked by virtue of being so much full of ignorance, right? Then it becomes a real problem. So motivation around.
So, well, the thing there, that's a beautiful thing. You know, psychologists have a really, academic psychologists in the West have a really dumb thing where they claim there's no such thing as altruism, because they've observed that someone who cultivates altruism and thinks that way and lives that way and becomes more and more that way, they're doing it because they get great satisfaction out of it. So therefore, there's a selfish motive in altruism. So it's not real altruism. They get into the, whereas Shantideva or any of the Buddhist psychologists, and Buddha, who was the psychologist, therapist, he noted that as a bonus. That is to say, you learn that when you open up a little and you feel what other people feel and then interact smoothly and lovingly and pleasantly with that, it makes you happy. When you act to just make yourself happy, you're always dissatisfied because you don't have enough. So you're always evaluating what you got. What do I get out of it all? And it's never enough, so you're never happy. So the way of the method has to do with looking at the sort of slightly paradoxical nature of life. The less you worry about yourself being in the center, the better you feel. So then you're actually succeeding in the original selfish idea of having it all when you really want others to have it all. So they mutually work really well. And when you learn that, then you get a strong motive, you get a self-interest in order to fulfill others' interests and to be altruistic. And as the Dalai Lama likes to say beautifully, he says, if you want to be successfully selfish and get what you want, be altruistic. Because when you're altruistic, the first person who gets happy is you. You may not be that skillful with your altruism, and you may not help the other person as much as you wanted to, but by trying, you're going to feel better.
Yeah.
And so that's a fail safe, I love it. It's just so cool.
And I think that motivation comes from the experiential nature of actually extending yourself outside of your box, and then
absolutely
in that moment there's a realization, and your worry about yourself. As soon as you're walking across the street, somebody needs help, and you go to help them. Before that, you were thinking, "Oh my God, today is just horrible. My wife is this, and my kids not going blah blah." And then suddenly you do that action because it's in front of you. You have no choice, and you do the action, and then you realize, in the doing of the action, your stuff, quote unquote, just absolutely dissipated into nothing.
It's bracketed. That's right. That is absolutely right.
So
and
just
so
taking
that's
that
systematic. The point is that's a systematic method, because we're badly educated in our society. And I mean Harvard, Exeter, whatever you want, expensive, fancy schools. But none of them educate us to cultivate positive emotions and to diminish and to uncultivate and unlearn negative habits. And they act like that's sort of your mom's supposed to help you do that, or your psychotherapist, or whatever life experience will help you do that. And we just teach you facts and skills and how to go around and manipulate things in the world. And as Dalai Lama said when he got honorary degree, doctorate at Columbia, Doctor of Humanity, he got that. And he said, great, I love it. Education is the most important thing in the world. He said, we cannot have any decent society anywhere without education. He said, but I worry about your education, he said to the trustees and faculty of Columbia. He says, because you focus only on educating the clever brain and you don't educate the good heart. And a clever brain without a good heart could actually be dangerous for others, because the person would be manipulative and whatever, using cleverness to manipulate others. And also dangerous for the person, because when they live like that, they are going to get more and more unhappy themselves. They might get more money, they might get more status and power, but then they'll feel more isolated from other people. Other people won't like them. They'll feel that, they'll get more closed off, and they're going to have an unhappy life. And then they'll be worse. So he said, please think about trying to cultivate how to educate the heart as part of academic mission.
And it just,
heard him,
they all
yeah.
nodded and looking very benign, and oh, he's so great telling us this, and yes, of course we should do that, and we should be not, the dorm master should go and like take a look at the people in the dorm, but no idea that there's a course in that, like how to develop a better mental concentration, how to become aware of your own emotional narratives that are in your mind, which is what mindfulness does.
Yeah.
Mindfulness doesn't make you into a geek, like a Hindu geek or a Buddhist geek or a Sufi geek or a Kabbalah geek. Mindfulness makes you a better manager of your own inner emotions because it develops more inner mental freedom.
Yeah.
And you don't have to just jump on every impulse that you have because you see where the impulse comes from. It's like learning to play a pinball machine. You know how to flip which lever, And as I would say, mindfulness is like getting a clicker for the different channels in your mind. So you can turn off the commercials and you can turn off the weird programs that are making you crazy,
Yeah.
And listen to more of the nice ones that are helping you, that are tracing you. So that's the thing. So George Soros, who I adore, who's a hero of mine. He made a beautiful university in Hungary, which has been ruined by Putin's pal, who is the new dictator in Colombia, unfortunately. And
in Poland.
So then he wants to make one in the West, and he gave $1 billion or pledged $1 billion. And I don't know exactly how I haven't managed to catch up with it. I think he gave it to Bard College, or he was channeling it through Bard, which is a very innovative, and they do a lot of good.
Yeah,
they have things like go and teach in a prison as part of your study.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And teach yoga to some prisoner. They have things like that, and they're really brilliant. So, I don't know how they're going to make a new world university out of it, but we have to do that.
Yeah.
The Buddhists in India had Nalanda University, which had a core curriculum that involved how to train your mind, not just your brain to be manipulative.
So one of the things, Bob, here that, again, this for many people is a bit of an arcane concept, and you do get into it and maybe just get it down dirty, which is you say the first step towards a realistic worldview is one taken to accept the reality of causation. Understanding both cause and effect is relative and temporarily infinite,
right?
Ultimately beginningless and endless. We then can confront the causal world more creatively, knowing we are both part of it and potentially all of it. We can face its immensity and dedicate our potential infinite energy towards making the world even better for everyone. So let's
Did you write that? You read it. I like the way you read it. Sounds better than what I think about it. So I forget what I write, That's really good. Well, there are two things in that. In other words, I don't think the causality is so arcane because actually science, that's the basis of science, is to look into causes. Because by looking into the causes of a bad thing, and a doctor does that too, that's when they prevent that bad thing from happening, or they ameliorate this condition of the bad thing. So causation investigation is a thing. There was a president at Amherst College who was a classicist, and he thinks that science is only Western. He did, at least before we talked, and I don't know if he really changed his mind after we did. And he has a story about a Galen, the Greek doctor, who analyzed, a ship came in filled with corpses, floated into the harbor in Rhodes, and everybody had died on the ship. And then the people started getting sick in the town, and then people ran to the temple of Athena to stop the plague. And he said, no, we don't go to the temple of Athena. We see the causes, the dead bodies. They had some infestation, and we burn the ship and the dead bodies, and then we'll be okay. So he considered that the birth of the Western interest in causation rather than the gods causing things, and so that's pretty normal. But I agree when I say that the chicken and egg problem is solved by just letting it go, letting that chicken and that egg just go back, and who's the first chicken and who's the first egg, don't worry about it. It doesn't. What you worry about is which egg am I in, which chicken, and which next egg is going to happen, and you just keep work on it in your own sphere. So that's the easy part. The harder part is to sort of open up to the boundarylessness of life, and then realize that what you do now becomes the cause of endless consequence. And so therefore it gives more weight on making good decision, even in tiny baby steps level, rather than a bad one. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're gonna get mad, well, just do it in a less violent manner and for shorter time and with less emotion, than just going berserk,
Yeah.
And so this baby step, try to interfere with habitual causations and make them more consciously designed to be better. And so that's
I
good.
like that. That's baby steps to interfere with the habitual causation in your life.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
that's
right.
phenomenal.